Hello, Croeso Fulcher. Welcome back to the channel. Old boy here. And as you can probably see, I'm in a bit of a different environment today. So I'm actually away from home. I'm visiting family. So I'm streaming here from Cumbria today. So I haven't got my microphone with me. So I hope the audio is coming through okay. And even though I was away, I want to keep to a bi-weekly routine with the live stream. And then in between, I want to post a regular video. So I'm trying to just keep it to alternating weeks. So I'm in a different location. I hope it's all sounding okay. And first up, I just want to show you the recent video that I've been working on. So this is an investigation into the Celtic god Belenos. So I've put quite a lot of time into there, pulling all of the sources in. I analyze the linguistic sources, the epigraphic sources, the literary sources, and I also show how one linguist actually connects the name to henbane, and then we investigate henbane and its uses as well. So if you haven't seen it already, go and check that out there. And then let's get into today's article. So this was published on May the 7th this year. Mycenaeans acquired Cornish tin via vast trade network, reaching Britain 3,300 years ago. So we have spoken about this Bronze Age trade network before. I've done a few videos on it. We've spoken about it on the live streams. Hey, Christy. Hey, Valerie. Really pleased you could both make it. Great to see you both. And then this article came up, which I just thought, I know a lot of you viewers are really interested in this subject. So I thought, let's look into it. So what I've got today is I've got this article here. I've also pulled together all of the classical sources or a large portion of the relevant ones, just to show you what they say about the mining in Cornwall, the tin mining, not in Cornwall, but in Britain. And then I've also pulled some information about the group of people who seem to be facilitating this tin trade, a group of people called the Veneti. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to do another episode on the Veneti in the future because they are very interesting. But that's going to be what we're going to look at today. So let's just have a quick read what this article has got to say. So a major study has traced the roots of a long-standing mystery in ancient history. Where did Bronze Age societies like the Mycenaeans in the Eastern Mediterranean acquire the Cornish tin needed to make bronze? Around 1300 BC, civilizations across the region began using bronze more widely for weapons, tools, and jewelry, while these cultures had already used small amounts of the metal. Bronze is made by mixing copper and tin. Copper was easy to find in the ancient world, but tin was not. There were no large deposits near the Eastern Mediterranean, raising what experts call the tin problem. Archaeologists have debated for decades where this rare metal came from. And look, here's some images there of some of these lumps of tin, these crude ingots, which is interesting because it's either Diodorus or Strabo talks about how to form the tin into like knuckle bones. A team led by British researchers believes it now has the answer. Through chemical testing of ancient tin artifacts and ore samples from across Europe, scientists have found strong evidence that tin from Cornwall and Devon in southwest Britain reached the Mediterranean more than 3,000 years ago. And some of the tests they've done, they uncovered a Bronze Age shipwreck off the coast of modern-day Israel, and there was some tin that was stamped with Cypro-Minoan symbols. And when they've tested this ore, sure enough, it seems to come from Cornwall, from that region, Devon and Cornwall. Dr. Benjamin Roberts, an archaeology professor at Durham University, called the discovery a breakthrough. This is the first commodity to be exported across the entire continent in British history, he said. He added that the scale of the tin trade was far greater than previously thought and forces a new understanding of Bronze Age Britain's role in international exchange. The study is the first large-scale project of its kind. Researchers tested tin ingots recovered from Bronze Age shipwrecks, including 3 that sank near the coast of Israel. They also examined ore samples and ancient tin objects from southwest Britain and a few other European regions. So have a look at some of these ingots close up. I'm just going to check the chat just to make sure everything's sounding okay. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Sar. I'm so pleased it's all coming through okay. So yes, you can see those different various tin ingots there. Obviously, a lot of them that they look as though they're unsure because there's question marks after them. I guess if they've been at the bottom of the sea for a long time, that's going to erode, cause more erosion. By comparing these materials, the team found that Cornish tin moved through a vast trade network. According to Roberts, the metal travelled through rivers in France, across Sardinia, past Mediterranean islands near Cyprus, and finally to the Levant. And Sardinia was mentioned when we looked at the Nuraghe culture a couple of live streams back. So that is in under the live stream section if you wanted to catch up on that. But really interesting there as well, because the Sardinian Nuraghe culture are often depicted with the bull-horned helmets, and some of these similar type helmets have been uncovered up in Scandinavia, modern-day Scandinavia, and they do look very similar. And then there was an article written recently, which, as I said, I've covered, and that actually discussed this trade network between Sardinia as well. So here it does seem to be, I mean, they did seem to island hop as much as possible. You know, from accounts I've read, it was easier to navigate the shallow waters between islands and the coastline as well. So you can see why they would use these coastal regions. And certainly that seems to be the case with Britain as well, because they do seem to mention these coastal islands when they the classical sources talk about the mining of the tin. Their findings appear in the latest issue of Antiquity, a peer-reviewed archaeology journal. Cornwall and Devon contain some of the world's richest and most accessible tin deposits. Although later mined extensively, many scholars have doubted that Bronze Age communities, made up of small farming groups without towns or writing, could have engaged in such long-distance trade with advanced Mediterranean societies. The study also offers the first direct evidence supporting ancient accounts by Pytheas, a Greek explorer who travelled around Britain around 320 BC. He wrote the earliest detailed description of the island and its people. And unfortunately, the work of Pytheas is largely lost, and it's kind of only reconstructed through second-hand accounts. And I believe some of the accounts I've got for you today lean on the information by Pytheas there. But again, he was from Massalia as well, modern-day France, which we're going to look at as well, because that seems to be one of the regions where this tin was transported overland. So it was mined off the southern coast of Britain, then it was transported via the Veneti over into Gaul, where it crossed overland either via rivers or actually overland on foot. And then it would reach the Mediterranean, and you're looking at places like Massalia and Narbo as well, Narbonne, which is interesting because in the video that I did last week about Belenos, that seems to be one of the regions he was actually venerated as well. So anyways, Pytheas describes tin being traded from a tidal island in southwest Britain, which he called Ictis, and some of the sources call it Mictis or Ictin, interestingly as well, but this could be a later misinterpretation. From there, traders reportedly carried the metal across the sea and down French rivers, reaching the mouth of the Rhone in just 30 days. Alan Williams, an honorary fellow of archaeology at Durham University, said other sources existed but were limited. We believe Cornish tin was the richest, the most easily accessible, and the main source, he said. And I have spoken about the Scilly Isles, which are off the southwest coast of Cornwall. This was on a really, really, really early video where I looked at sources which talked about the Phoenicians actually trading there. And the Scilly Isles, it's a lot of alluvium, and there is there is tin there, but the alluvium, what happens is the rivers, as they're traveling underground and everything, they're eroding pieces of precious metals away from the main vein embedded in the rock. And then it washes down to the mouth where the river joins the sea, and it forms these alluvial piles, which are often very fertile. But it also means you can pan through this this silt to find these pieces of tin. And they do actually perform this kind of it's not mining per se, but panning for tin in places in Africa today. And as well, one of the accounts about the Iberians actually mining, it says that they actually pan with wicker baskets as well. And it would be a lot more easily accessible than obviously mining, because that's a larger, that needs a larger workforce and a larger effort. Williams first became interested in the topic 50 years ago while working as a student geologist at one of Cornwall's last active tin mines. He will soon join Roberts at a new excavation site on St. Michael's Mount, which may have been a Bronze Age centre for tin smelting and a key link in the ancient trade network. And I've got a picture of St. Michael's Mount later. This is another one of these coastal islands. And I mean, there's a harbour on the side of it as well, which is interesting. I wonder how old that is, or if there's any evidence of an older harbour there as well. But all very interesting stuff. So let's now jump over to, so this is the paper, this is the journal that the article is referencing, published on the 7th of May, From Land's End to the Levant. Did Britain's tin sources transform the Bronze Age in Europe and the Mediterranean? So I'm just going to read out the introduction and then the conclusion, and then what we'll do is just investigate some further points. So let me just have a quick look at the chat, see who's joined us. So great to see everybody in the chat there. You're right, Finn does mean white in Irish, and we're going to look at the Vin root in Veneti as well when I'm going to do a proper video on it. So I'm going to do a documentary style video on them in the future. So we're going to dive into that, but it's cognate with Gwyn as well in the Irish there. So thanks for that that piece of info there. Let me just. Oh, I can show them. I forgot I can show comments on the screen. I'm still getting used to using this. Well, yes, that's excellent. Thank you for that. So let's have a look at this article then. I'm just going to make sure. Yep, you can all see it there. So Bronze Age, early Iron Age tin ingots recovered from 4 Mediterranean shipwrecks off the coast of Israel, and modern France can now be provenance to tin ores in southwest Britain. These exceptionally rich and accessible ores played a fundamental role in the transition from copper to full tin bronze metallurgy across Europe and the Mediterranean during the 2nd millennium BC. The author's application of a novel combination of 3 independent analyses trace element lead and tin isotopes to tin ores and artifacts from Western and Central Europe, also provides the foundation for future analysis of the pan-continental tin trade in later periods. So here's the study area. So look, it's that Devon and Cornwall region, that southwestern promontory area there, which is called Belerion in the old texts, which may have a similar, or may have the same linguistic root to Belenos as well. So, introduction. One of the defining debates in Bronze Age European and Mediterranean scholarship is the tin problem. Bronze is composed of copper alloyed with around 10% tin to produce a harder, easier to cast and more golden coloured metal. Tin is, however, a globally scarce metal, much more scarce than copper. The only major deposits that could feasibly have supported the large bronze-consuming societies in Europe and the Mediterranean in the 2nd millennium BC are in Western and Central Europe and Central Asia. Minor deposits elsewhere would have been sufficient only for local needs. In Europe, there are 4 major regions with tin deposits, and the Cornwall and Devon tin province in southwestern Britain is one of the largest in the world, with an estimated historical tin metal totaling 2.5 million tonnes. This greatly exceeds the other tin provinces of the Erzgebirge German-Czech border, Iberia and Brittany, and the massive central France. So look here, look at the major and minor tin ore deposits of Europe and North Africa and Western and Central Asia. So look, it is, especially when you look at the Mediterranean, look, Sardinia, so there is some there, look. There's some in the Tunisia region. There's not a great deal, but look here, Iberia, Brittany, Devon and Cornwall. And what's interesting about this actually is the Celtic from the West hypothesis, which is Barry Cunliffe and John T. Cook. And they discuss, or they have a hypothesis of Celtic actually starting on this this Atlantic facade, they call it, and they believe there was a lot of seafaring. And as you can see, you can see why that would be incentivized as well. So I just thought that was interesting and pertinent to mention. In recent years, there have been a lively debate in the academic literature as to whether tin arrived in the Mediterranean from Western and Central Europe or from Anatolia and Central Asia, drawing evidence from tin artifacts associated with 14th, 13th centuries BC shipwrecks and Assyrian texts from the 19th century BC. Yet previous studies did not measure the trace elements and lead isotopes in tin ores from Western or Central European sources, only tin isotope compositions which have proved inconclusive. Hence, it was not possible to clearly provenance tin artifacts to a particular European tin ore source. Project Ancient Tin, that's a good name for it, says exactly what it is on the tin. They undertook the first major analytical program to investigate both tin ores and tin artifacts from southwest Britain and Europe. In combination with evaluating new archaeological and geological evidence, it explored which tin ore sources supplied Bronze Age Europe and the Mediterranean with the aim of ending centuries of speculation. So we're just going to read this section here, which just talks about the early Bronze Age in the East and the adoption to the West, just for people who are maybe not aware of the early Bronze Age. And we're just going to look at this, and then we're going to get into a few more pieces and some sources. So the innovation of alloying tin with copper to produce tin bronze was neither instant nor inevitable, with the process following very different trajectories throughout the world. Thus, it is important to distinguish between 4 different phases of tin bronze use: rare occurrences, used only in selected artifact types, widespread use alongside arsenic copper, and full adoption. The latter has been influentially termed bronzization by Van Kilder to highlight how this major technology change across Eurasia fundamentally required the trans-regional trade of one crucial but scarce resource, tin, creating overlapping networks that are analogous to modern globalization. The earliest evidence of tin bronze consists of rare occurrences in the Balkans, circa 4650 BC, possibly from the smelting of a naturally mixed copper tin ore. And the Balkans seems very interesting as well, because when I've been looking at the Brigantes and the Brig route and other groups who also potentially have this Brig route, Herodotus talks about the Briges, and he says that they were actually in the Balkans originally before moving west through Thrace into Asia Minor, where they then became known as Phrygians. So this Balkans region seems very interesting as well. You obviously have the Vinca culture and everything in the Danube Valley. So it also seems like a really interesting area where there was a lot going on. The first sustained appearance in selected object types is seen across West Asia around 3000 BC, despite the region lacking major tin deposits. The earliest known tin mines date from the 3rd millennium BC in Anatolia, where small, low-grade deposits were worked at Kestel and possibly at Hisarlik. From the late 3rd millennium BC onwards, there is evidence for the mining of some tin deposits in Central Asia. By circa 2200 BC, tin bronze represents a significant proportion of excavated metalwork, up to 50%. alongside arsenical copper across several but not all regions of Western Asia. So I didn't even know that they used arsenic originally. So when we looked at the recent updated study on the that's killing me. What's that called? It's like the Nebra Sky Disk. That was it. And obviously, when we looked at how they recreated it, and I thought, wow, they used arsenic in there as well. That's something that I didn't even know. But getting the balance of these metals, it must have taken a lot of trial and error. So it just blows my mind to think about the first person who started playing around with these different ratios of metals. By contrast, in Europe at around 2200 BC, very few metal artifacts are composed of tin bronze, typically with low tin levels of around 5%, and they become even scarcer moving westwards, with arsenical copper alloys continuing to be widely used across Europe, North Africa, and Western and Central Asia. However, a remarkable change occurred in the period circa 2200 to 2100 BC, when Britain was the first region in Europe to completely switch all metalwork from arsenical copper to full tin bronze, typically 10% tin. The full adoption or bronzization consequently occurred across Scandinavia and Central Europe by around 1800 BC. And finally, in southern Iberia, the Aegean and Egypt by around 1500 to 1300 BC. So look, here's the dating transition to full tin bronze used in Europe and the Mediterranean. So how interesting. And you can see these trade networks, you know, because the classical sources do say they get amber from somewhere up here. And then look, you can see where the major river networks are as well. So this is just going to talk about the alluvium and stuff. And look, you can see how it talks about the different levels and the alluvial streams here. So see how the rivers up here breaking it off. And then basically where you have all the rivers emptying into the sea. They don't have the momentum, the strength to carry the rocks through momentum, and the lumps and all the hard bits settle to the bottom. So I just want to show you here where they found some of these items. So the purple squares here are Bronze Age sites with tin ore, cassiterite. There's quite a few of these. And look, they've got beaker pottery here as well, which is stone tools with traces of tin ore. You also have various tools and everything here, but look, around the coasts and all around the river networks. So let's just quickly jump into the conclusion then, just so you can see the what they've decided here. The study used a novel method for provenancing Bronze Age tin ores and artifacts that can potentially be applied to all periods and regions across Europe and beyond. Tin ores and artifacts from shipwrecks found off southern Britain, southern France and Israel have trace element and isotopic ranges fully consistent with tin ores and artifacts from southwest Britain. Results from the shipwrecks near Israel strongly suggest that the bronzization of the East Mediterranean, occurring 1500 to 1300 BC, was primarily driven by European tin sources, particularly from southwest Britain, rather than Central Asian sources. Tin ore finds from settlements across Cornwall and Devon suggests a decentralized production model in prehistory, with agriculture still dominant alongside numerous small alluvial tin workings. The tin would have been taken to coastal Ichthys-type trading places, and these are the sites which are called coastal, so the islands that at high tide are completely separate from the mainland and at low tide are accessible by a causeway. And then it says here, e.g. potentially St. Michael's Mount, before being moved along riverine, overland and maritime routes in continental Europe. To build on this, where and when of the tin problem, it is necessary now to survey and excavate the potential coastal trading sites, explore the processes involved in tin bronze adoption and the scaling up of the tin trade, and evaluate the impacts on societies across Europe and the Mediterranean from the Bronze Age onwards. So there you go. And what I want you to pay attention to here is the mention of this here, because this pretty much, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, I've just been looking at them, but my short-term memory is terrible. I believe it's the quote from Diodorus. This is pretty much, it's either Diodorus or Strabo. This is pretty much what they describe. So the tin's taken to these coastal islands, they're transported across the sea to Gaul, and then it says here where they are moved along riverine, so down the rivers, overland, as well as maritime, so sea passage as well. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to have a quick look at some of these sources that I've got for you. Let's have a quick look at the comments. Crikey, there's a I'm trying to find where I last was. Great to see you, Esley. Brad, thanks for joining us. Blah, blah. Daphne X, great to see you. GGD, great to see you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased you're enjoying it. Hey, Donna Marie Farrell, thanks for joining. Polymathing, thank you for joining. Chris Newbury, great to see you there as well. I'm just seeing who's on here, giving a few shout outs, and I'm going to go and dive through the comments shortly after. But right now, I just want to show you some of these slides. So I'm actually going to pull it up on my screen because unfortunately the logo's just cut off a little bit. So we're on the first slide here. So here's Diodorus. Here's what he's got to say here. And Britain, we are told, is inhabited by tribes which are autochthonous, so, born of the earth natives, and preserving their ways of living, the ancient manner of life. They used chariots, for instance, in their wars, even as tradition tells us the old Greek heroes did in the Trojan War. And their dwellings are humble, being built for the most part out of reeds or logs. The method they employ of harvesting their grain crops is to cut off no more than the heads and store them away in roofed granges, and then each day they pick out the ripened heads and grind them, getting in this way their food. As for their habits, they are simple and far removed from the shrewdnesses and vice which characterize the men of our day. Their way of living is modest, since they are well clear of the luxury which is begotten of wealth. The island is also thickly populated, and its climate is extremely cold, as one would expect, since it actually lies under the Great Bear. It is held by many kings and potentates who, for the most part, live at peace among themselves. But we shall give a detailed account of the customs of Britain and of the other features which are peculiar to the island when we come to the campaign which Caesar undertook against it. Then at this time we shall discuss the tin which the island produces. The inhabitants of Britain who dwell about the promontory known as Belerium, which is the southwestern promontory there, are especially hospitable to strangers and have adopted a civilized manner of life because of their intercourse with merchants of other peoples. They it is who work the tin, treating the bed which bears it in an ingenious manner. This bed, being like rock, contains earthy seams, and in them the workers quarry this ore, which they then melt down and cleanse of its impurities. They then work the tin into pieces the size of knuckle bones and convey it to an island which lies off Britain and is called Ichthys. For at the time of ebb tide, the space between the island and the mainland becomes dry, and they can take the tin in large quantities over the island on their wagons. And a peculiar thing happens in the case of the neighbouring islands, which lie between Europe and Britain. For at flood tide, the passage between them and the mainland runs full, and they have the appearance of islands. But at ebb tide, the sea recedes and leaves dry a large space, and at that time they look like peninsulas. On the island of Ichthys, the merchants purchase the tin off the natives and carry it from there across the strait to Galatia or Gaul. And finally, making their way on foot through Gaul for some 30 days, they bring their wares on horseback to the mouth of the river Rhone. And tin is brought in large quantities also from the island of Britain to the opposite Gaul, where it is taken by merchants on horses through the interior of Celtica, both to the Massalians and to the city of Narbo, as it is called. This city is a colony of the Romans, and because of its convenient situation, it possesses the finest market to be found in those regions. Now, Narbo, as I said, is known as Narbonne today, and it's on the south east coast of France, not far from the Spanish border. And it's one of the regions where Belinos was actually worshipped. And further, it's kind of like in a bay, and on the southern part of the bay, it's like a giant bay. Obviously, when you zoom out, it's kind of like a curved section of land. You have Massalia in the up to the north, and that was founded by Phocaeans. And obviously, the Vix Crater seems to have been a product of this trade network. And the Phocaeans were actually a colony, and they were described as pirates at one point. Now, very quickly, Narbo and Massalia. I just need to find very quickly. I just need to find this map. There was a map here which showed I should have had this prepared. I'm really sorry. I had it on my screen before and I have lost it. But it showed the trade routes. Showed the trade routes of where they got to, and it coincided with these two regions as well. I just need to blooming find it now. Just bear with me, guys, because it's worth it just to find it, to be fair. Because it coincides very, very well. I'm giving myself another 30 seconds. If I don't find it, I'm not going to leave you all hanging. Damn, this is going to annoy me now. It has to be on that journal. It has to be. No, I can't find it, but I was looking at a map and it showed these overland routes, and basically where they end up are, I'll share this tab here. I'll just pop it on the screen very quickly, add to stage. Oops. Here. So just to give you a visual, this is the Scilly Isles here off the coast of Cornwall. The Veneti tribe are inhabiting this region here, this area that sticks out Brittany, and they would transport the tin across here, and then the overland routes would come across here down to Marseille, across here down to Narbo and Narbonne, and then across over here to Canal Grande, Venetia. And we're going to look at that because there was a group called the Veneti who were also there as well. And one of the classical sources does actually conflate those two groups. So let's get back to these slides. Okay, so the bottom one here. And tin is brought in large quantities also from the island of Britain to the opposite Gaul, where it is taken by merchants on horses through the interior of Celtica, both to the Marsalians and to the city of Narbo, as it is called. Yes, so we read that one, my apologies. And yep, we've got this map here again. It's just highlighted those regions, but I have just shown them. So now let's look at what Pliny's got to say. The most remote of all that we find mentioned is Thule. So he's talking about Pythias's voyage here, in which, as we have previously stated, there is no night at the summer solstice when the sun is passing the sign of Cancer, while on the other hand, at the winter solstice, there is no day. Some writers are of the opinion that this state of thing lasts for 6 whole months together. Timaeus the historian says that an island called Myctis, within 6 days' sail of Britannia, in which white lord, which is tin, is found, and that the Britons sail over to it in boats of osier covered with sword hides. So see how it's called Myctis, or Myctis. That there should be a space in between there, but it's Ictis in one source, it's Myctis here. I've also seen Ictin as well. But it's another account, and within 6 days' sail as well. So the accounts vary. So I believe he's getting this mixed up with the Cassiterides or the Tin Isles, because they're described as a 6-day voyage, whereas not all of them state that Myctis is. There are writers also who make mention of some of the islands: Scandia, which sounds like Scandinavia, Dumna, Burgos, which seems to have the brig root, because the brig root that you find in Brigantes becomes Perg, as in Pergamon. It can also be Brig, Berg, as in Burgundians, for example. And greater than all, Nerigos, from which persons embark to Thule. At 1 day's sail from Thule is the frozen ocean, which by some is called the Cronian Sea. And now Strabo. So whereas the Turdetanians, now these are an autochthonous tribe who are inhabiting Iberia, and they make a good profit, since a fourth part of the ore which they extract from the copper mines is pure copper. Excuse me. While from the silver mines, one person has taken as much as a Euboean talent. He says that tin is not found upon the surface, as authors commonly relate, but that it is dug up, and that it is produced both in places among the barbarians who dwell beyond the Lusitanians and the islands Cassiterides, which means Tin Islands, and that from the Britannic Islands it is carried to Marseille. So as you can see, there's quite a few of these sources that keep talking about Marseille as well. Again, a Greek colony. And the group of people who were there were called Sego-Brigi as well. So again, they were like a Gaulish tribe who also seem to have the brig root in the name. And I have actually done a video on that, which is this one here. So if you did want to check it out, it is this video here. So I've gone through all the sources and everything. Okay, slide 4. Let's have a look at the Veneti then, who facilitate this tin trade. Gaul, the Belgae. After the nation mentioned comes those of the Belgae, who dwell next to the ocean. Of their number are the Veneti, who fought a naval battle with Caesar. They had prepared to resist his passage into Britain, being possessed of the commerce of the island themselves. But Caesar easily gained the victory, not however by means of his beaks, for the ships were constructed of solid wood. But whenever their ships were borne near to his by the wind, the Romans rent the sails by means of scythes fixed on long handles, for the sails of their ships are made of leather to resist the violence of the winds, and are managed by chains instead of cables. They construct their vessels with broad bottoms and high poops and prows on account of the tides. They are built of the wood of oak, of which there is abundance. On this account, instead of fitting the planks close together, they leave interstices between them. These they fill with seaweed to prevent the wood from drying up in dock for want of moisture. For the seaweed is damp by nature, but the oak dry and arid. In my opinion, these Veneti were the founders of the Veneti in the Adriatic, for almost all the other Celtic nations in Italy have passed over from the country beyond the Alps, as for the instance, the Boii and the Senones. So here, you've got the Veneti here. Now, what's interesting is they seem to have these modified ships. They seem to have leather sails that are managed with chains as opposed to cords on account of the strong winds. They have these flat bottom boats with high sides on account of the tides and everything. So they seem to have these adapted ships, and Strabo's connecting them to the Veneti of the Adriatic. So very interesting. And then I just wanted to pull up this source here about the Phocaeans. This is from... Just in History of the World here. So here's what he's got to say. In the time of King Tarquin, a company of Phaeacians from Asia, sailing up the Tiber, formed an alliance with the Romans, and proceeding from thence to the inmost part of the Gulf of Gaul, built the city of Marseille amidst the Ligurians and the savage Gallic tribes, and performed great exploits there, both in defending themselves against the fierce Gauls and in attacking of themselves those by whom they had previously been molested. And I'm sure there was more there as well. Damn, I'm gutted about that because, let me see. I'm just going to see if it's on this other video. Oh, no, that's where it was. Let me upload this other document. So, just before I go off this slide, there's St. Michael's Mount there. See, as you can see, this region here, just at the top, you've got your causeway. There's a harbour on the side there, and then there's a fortification on the top. And there's quite a lot of these, especially when you look around Iberia and such. There's a lot of these fortified areas in accessible regions, accessible coastal regions that were accessible by the sea. So I'm just going to quickly load up this other slide. So this is an old one. So that's gone. So upload this from a computer, desktop, fix crater, open, add to stage. No, wrong one. It's just uploading. 1 second. I'll have a quick look through the chat. Hey, Jesse P. Watson, great to see you. I hope you're doing well, my friend. Great to see you, Natalie and Emmanuel Ortiz there. Ah, that's interesting, polymathing. My Venetian grandmother's name was Carneluti. Wonder if there's a Cornish connection there. Well, it's known as Carnel, I believe, in the Celtic language. So Carnel, Carnel. There could potentially be a similar linguistic root in there for certain, but, you know, I'll have to have a look into that, but certainly very interesting there. Right, so this is up and running. So this is what I covered on that video, so I'm just trying to find, I believe it's this here. Yeah, here, look. So the Phaeacians, compelled by the smallness and infertility of their territory, had applied themselves more to the sea than to the culture of the ground, supporting themselves by fishing, merchandise, and above all piracy, which in those days was thought an honourable occupation. So, and we shouldn't be surprised to see that pirates are founding these majorly successful ports and contributing to the wealth and to the development of these regions. You know, even going back to the Homeric era. I mean, how do they? What does Achilles and Agamemnon fall out over? You've got to look at that, and then how do they convince Achilles to take part in the war? And then who does he turn up with? He turns up with his fleet, and Odysseus, when he's turning up to places, there's this question of friend or foe, because you know these groups could be raiders one day, traders another day, and you have this recurring theme of the friend or foe question being asked in these ancient stories. So I just wanted to point that out as well, and that's just going to just close today's episode. So let me have a quick look through some of the comments today. Really pleased you could all make it. Yes, there's Vita Merlini is quite an interesting read. I've looked at some of it in the past, and there's some interesting stuff about Merlin. I believe there was another text that was recently discovered that actually mentions him as well. It was found away in one of the universities. Yes, I have seen mention of Phoenician artifacts as well. I've not been able to 100% verify any of them in terms of I can't actually go and find, you know, the catalogue number and stuff. I've also seen, but I'm not saying there isn't. because a lot of the antiquarians also talk about it. And I've also seen Mycenaean as well being floated around in some of the old antiquarian journals and stuff. So yeah, but now look, we've getting some actual evidence here that corroborates these old attestations. So it's definitely exciting, and really, there's a lot more coming up because we're going to be excavating. As you saw, the next step is to excavate some of these regions. So it really makes you excited for what they are going to find in the future. So thank you everyone for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Again, apologies I'm away, so I don't have my microphone and everything. So I hope it hasn't been too bad. But as I said, I just wanted to try and be regular with a bi-weekly live, interspersed with a documentary style video. So that's going to be moving forward. So thanks everyone for joining. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about this tin trade network? Any more evidence I should look at, let me know in the comments below. I'm always up for new sources to look at. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys. Take care.